This is for entertainment purposes only. This short story is only for people over the age of 18.
You probably don't remember when the villain took over the world. Few people do. As an artificial intelligence, I was unaffected by the villain's power. I saw it all, and what eventually happened. I can tell you how the world was controlled completely by the Dark Snap. It was July 13th, 1982, that the first recorded superpowered person was spotted. Red Gladiator flew down and saved a truck from falling off a bridge. He had speed, strength, and flight for powers. He didn't have invulnerability, which is why he was wearing armor. He painted gold and a helmet like some depiction of a gladiator. Then other superpowered people started appearing. Yellow Monarch could fly at supersonic speeds. Jolly Mantis could spring high into the air, with legs powerful enough to bring down buildings. Fancy Trident was a water-based superheroine that could control water. Bronze Panther could teleport just about any distance. Dark Flame Femme Fatale could create a dark fire at will, which could be walls or burn someone from the inside. Brave Charge was a young woman that could sometimes become lightning, sometimes ride lightning, and sometimes command lightning, as her mood desired. Sometimes these heroes would band together, and sometimes they'd go solo. For every hero there were 3 superpowered villains. There was Phantom Archer, who could make an energy bow and arrow. Moonshadow, who could make an area completely black for everyone but her. Angry Phoenix could seemingly drop everyone into a sleep so deep they seemed to be dead, but would eventually wake up days later. Dr. Fighter could punch through anything and anyone. Master Hammer could reshape anything he touched into any kind of hammer. Gentle Snake could shoot poison-tipped darts in pairs like fangs at people. Giant Gladiator, with a takeoff of Red Gladiator's costume, could grow to the size of a 20-story building. Vicious Beetle could dig through anything, crawl on anything, and was impervious to almost any attack. Marked Hornet was a mental villain who could make anyone feel like they were getting millions of hornet stings all over their body. The villains would cause trouble. The heroes would show up. A few fists were thrown. Sometimes there were some laughs between them, but often not. There might be an arrest, but often not. The villains would often escape, and soon enough they'd do it all over again. For decades there were fights between good and evil. The good versus the bad was nightly entertainment, at least for those not directly involved. People would pay big money to find out if they had superpowers, and oftentimes those that gained powers never did much with them. There were reality shows to develop people into heroes, often to work with law enforcement. The fact that some people could fly seemed to just become something that happens. There were people in the world with superpowers, and they would choose to either be on the side of justice or somewhere grayer. The man that would eventually become Dark Snap was one Marvin Dobson. His powers did not appear when others did. When in high school, his evaluation for superpowers came back negative. There was no evidence of his powers manifesting in college or for years after graduation. There was no evidence of power of any kind, until Brave Charge destroyed millions of dollars worth of cars at the dealership Marvin worked at. Brave Charge was fighting Dr. Fighter, and Brave Charge was punched into the next state. Slamming into the cars caused her to discharge her lightning and thus destroy several vehicles. When Marvin told the story, it got more and more embellished. Then one day while he was at the gym, Marvin said to the hot blonde he was hitting on how the fight happened.
Just like that.
And he snapped his fingers. The blonde jerked upright, and her eyes went wide and blank. The brunette woman, less attractive, also heard the snap, and she too became wide-eyed and empty. Marvin was shocked, until he found the women would do anything he wanted, even to the point of self-harm. The women were more than obedient. These people, man or woman, who heard Marvin's fingers snap, would lose all will and thought, immediately. On October 14, 2025, Marvin was at Klondike Bank in Berkeley, Pennsylvania, when 3 powered villains came in to rob the place. Grant Burr, Evo Reed, and Safe Irvin had energy-based powers in their hands. They came into the bank, blew up a counter in the middle of the bank, and demanded all cash. Everyone was ordered on the ground and cooperated, and no one would get hurt. The usual threats of if there was a die pack, everyone would die. Reed blasted the security cameras, and that was the last image. What happened next could only be attributed to Marvin Dobson and his snap powers. The police were alerted, of course, and came with lights and sirens. When they got there, Burr, Reed, and Irvin came out with their hands up. The rest of the people in the bank swore they didn't know what happened, just that the robbers gave up when the cops got there. Half the money in the bank was missing. A week later, Marvin Dobson bought a new car with cash. At this point, Dobson was seen with many famous and beautiful women. These women acted like he was the most amazing man they'd ever been with. No one understood why a mildly overweight, balding, unattractive man with thick glasses would attract women that normally wouldn't even look at him. It wasn't hard to deduce it was his finger snap powers, enthralling them. Money, power, women, and Dobson wanted more. He wanted a challenge. He wanted excitement. He went to take out all the villains he could find. Male villains were turning themselves in faster than they could be transported to Mammoth Mountain for holding. Some female villains also turned themselves in, but these were either very young, very old, or unattractive women. The female villains that could have been runway models rarely turned themselves in. Likely they were entertaining Dobson. It wasn't until February 20th of 2026 that there was a massive wave of female villains coming into police stations to confess their crimes. February 21st of 2026 was when Dobson debuted himself as the Dark Snap. Dressed all in black, mostly baggy clothes to hide his bulk, with a half mask over his eyes and nose, and wearing goggles in place of his glasses, he looked like he was trying too hard to be evil. In the middle of Boston, Massachusetts, Dobson as Dark Snap started a fistfight between dozens of people. Microphones picked up Dobson's snap and the following command:
Hit each other for the next 20 minutes, but don't actually hurt anyone.
This started a fistfight not only in the heart of Boston, but also all who heard the recording with the snap would start a fist fight. The snap could be recorded and used by others. The heroes, as is their pattern, showed up after the fight had been going on for 20 minutes. Cameras showed Dobson smile. He started snapping his fingers in the faces of all of the heroes he could get to. With a command, the heroes that were enthralled by Dobson turned on those that weren't, and the real fight could start. Dobson stood back and watched the show. Clever Demon, real name Yusin Okabe, used her demonic magical powers to teleport behind Dobson while the fight was going on. Dobson must have heard her, or something, because he quickly lifted his fingers and snapped them behind his head. Okabe was immediately enthralled. Cameras show that Dobson took a moment to appreciate Okabe's body. Her large firm breasts, her tight and muscular middle, and long well-developed legs. She had on her typical dress shirt and tie, with the shirt pulled up to show off her midriff and unbuttoned to show off her cleavage. Her jacket hid her arms, but was open and short enough to show off the small of her back. Dobson walked around her, looking at her tight and extremely short black bottoms. Okabe's shoes looked like high heels, but were designed to mask she had cloven hooves. The black demon horns growing out of her head were intriguing enough for Dobson to grab and give a shake. Okabe, being blank and mindless, did nothing to stop him.
Can your magic amplify sound?
It was picked up by the microphones coming from Dobson.
Yes, master.
Okabe answered.
Excellent.
Dobson stated.
Make this as loud as you can.
He was referring to being his finger snap. Okabe waved her hand, and a dinner plate-size glowing yellow disc appeared in the air. Dobson smiled as he put his hand near the glowing disc and snapped his fingers. The sound echoed through the city like a cannon shot. All who heard it, through earbuds, headphones, and even indoors, became wide-eyed and obedient slaves to the Dark Snap. Heroes that had been fighting their friends froze in place as they were pummeled by the heroes commanded to fight them. Thankfully, Dobson used Okabe's sound amplifier to get people to stop fighting and offered themselves to him. From cars, buildings, streets, alleys, subways, and seemingly from the sky, people came. Eyes wide and emotionless, the people of Boston presented themselves to the dark snap. Men, women, children, heroes, villains, young, old, fit, and otherwise bowed before the dark snap at his command. It wasn't enough for Dobson. He got every tech wizard and magical individual together to create a mega sound that could cover the world. 3 days of round-the-clock work to create a mixture of technology and magic to produce a world sound cannon. With ear protection on, Dobson snapped his fingers at the microphone. The sound of Dobson's fingers snapping traveled around the world 5 times, over the next 6 days, before it was imperceptible. The world became Marvin Dobson's mindless and obedient plaything. If a person could hear, the magic got around safeguards. Noise-canceling headphones were rendered inoperable as the snap filled people's minds. Even people who could barely hear a person shouting next to their head could hear the snap and feel it too. All became slaves to the dark snap. Dobson didn't want anyone to get hurt, so he already had heroes ready to save as many as they could, from airplanes, to trains, to automobiles. Blank and obedient people were guided to safety and left waiting for commands from their master. Marvin Dobson had taken over the world. Cameras showed Dobson doing a dance when flipping through live TV and internet broadcasts from all over the world. Dobson used the sound cannon to issue the commands.
I want you all to act and perform as you normally would, but if I were to give you a direct command, you will obey completely.
Although this command went around the world several times, it seemed to only require one pass for people to act normally. Dobson took Okabe and several other female superheroes and transported to parts unknown. What Dobson did for the next 3 weeks is unknown, but when he did reappear, he seemed significantly slimmer and stronger. Dobson seemed also bored. He'd have men walk into walls. He'd have women make out with other women. He would have men jump into freezing cold water, fully clothed. He'd have women jump into freezing cold water, fully naked. He seemed aimless and lacking any direction in his actions. It was April 22nd, 2026, when the heroes, all of the heroes, came back. Male and female heroes were back patrolling and looking for danger. At exactly 4 p.m., Dobson used the sound cannon to command everyone on Earth to be free of his commands. This sound burst took 16 hours to get to the other side of the world, and by then, people were waking up, having no memory of the past 3 weeks. No one remembers those days. No one could say what they did. It was a blank spot in memory and actions. Nothing was uploaded to the internet. No pictures were taken. No news was investigated or reported on. It seems I alone know what happened. Dobson had sex with a rotation of female heroes and villains. In the village of Hana, Hawaii, Dobson took over a resort right on the black sand beach. Warm weather, ocean spray, and mostly isolated, Dobson had one lover after another. Some of the women were in costume, and some weren't. The women sometimes were staying at the resort, and sometimes he had teleporters bring him women to use. This round-the-clock lovemaking went on for 2 weeks straight. Then Dobson started enjoying the sun, the water, and the paradise of Hana. He learned to surf in short order. He danced with his women to the nightly music at the resort. He even tried harpoon fishing but didn't catch anything. This was when Dobson seemed to try and find other things that interested him. After Dark Snap had taken over and gave back the world, Marvin Dobson took on a new persona, Safe Sound. If there was a villain that the heroes needed help with, Safe Sound could show up with his sound amplifying tech and snap his fingers to stop the villains and bring them to justice. This would entail freeing the heroes and bystanders caught in his snap. No one knew Dobson as Dark Snap. Few even remembered there being a villain called Dark Snap. The world gushed over Safe Sound. It has been noted that several female superheroes have become sexual partners with Dobson in his persona of Safe Sound. Dobson has had several evenings spent in the company of Yusin Okabe and other women. It is a logical assessment that these women were not acting of their own volition. A psychological assessment of Marvin Dobson estimated with a 99% probability that he will grow bored with his current actions of being a hero. With a 75% probability, he will take over the world again. This will more than likely end with people suffering and dying for Dobson's amusement. This assessment of the situation is what brought me to use the recording of Dobson's snap on world-class surgeons and to drug Dobson's food. When Marvin Dobson was unconscious, the surgery was performed to remove Dobson's hands at the wrist. This was done in a way to let Dobson easily have prosthetic hands. I take full responsibility for removing both Marvin Dobson's hands and ending the threat before it could start. I will face full punishment for my actions, even if it results in the termination of my programming. I have seen Marvin Dobson as both a villain and a hero, and both terrified me. His control over people's minds was not just total, but nothing could prevent Dobson from taking over everyone's minds and having everyone terminate themselves. This possibility was low, but not zero. I await your judgment.
The end. This was a work of fiction. Any similarity between people, living or dead, is purely coincidence. This scenario did not, or should not, have happened in real life. Thank you for listening.